Hello, good evening. Welcome to Cabinet. It's Tuesday the 20th. Item number one, have we any apologies?
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you. Item number two, minutes of the previous meeting. Can I sign them as a matter of record? Agreed, yeah. Item number three, any declarations of interest on the two items on the agenda? Nope. Item number four, public participation. There are no questions from members of the public. Item number five, questions from Dorset Council members. There are no questions from Dorset councillors. Item number six, forward plan. It's as set out in the agenda papers for noting. I'm not going to comment. Anybody want to comment on those? Nope. Item number seven, it's the Wherham level crossing. So Councillor Andrews is going to present this and propose it, and I will second.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to propose this paper. This paper seeks Cabinet's approval to go out for tender for a new contract to control the gates at Wherham Level Crossing. The current contract is expiring and we will secure lower rates if we go out to tender for a longer period, which is why the paper recommends a 5-year contract period.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. As I will second that, and I would also like to thank our officers for doing this, both in coming to an agreement with Network Rail and also allowing us to go ahead and procure a 5-year contract. Any members of the Cabinet want actually, there's a member of non-Cabinet member here. Hannah, do you want to say anything? Nope. Any members of the Cabinet wish to comment? Councillor Hope.
Thank you very much, Leader. Councillor Ryan Hope, Cabinet Member for Customer, Culture and Community Engagement. I think it's a very sensible approach to go out for a longer tender to try and draw the price down. And I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion possibly with the Town and Parish Council in the area to see whether or not they would support any financial backing towards this tender. It's mainly the residents in that area will benefit, and it's just a question really if that's part of the process.
No, we haven't, but we will endeavour to ask. I don't know how far we'll get, but the Town and Parish Councils and the two local members agreed with the hour reduction in the timing, so we'll be closing the crossing at midnight instead of 1 a.m. in the morning.
Thank you very much, Councillor Andrews, for that response. And I think it's always good to discuss these matters with the local towns and parishes and get their buy-in and possible support, especially financial. All town and parishes make quite a lot of noise around cross-working, and I think this is a good example. So we should take that as a matter of practice going forward with pretty much everything.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. I believe I'm actually visiting Wherham Council very soon. I think it might be next week. If not next week, it's the week after. So I'll raise that with them. Does any member of the Cabinet disagree with the recommendations?
Yeah, just to say, can I just thank officers, Cabinet member and everyone who's involved with this, including our partners and the community. This a year ago appeared to be a problem that couldn't be solved, and this seems to be the first big step taken towards solving that problem. So I think the community will be grateful that the Cabinet have this in front of them, and I hope it gets approved. It's a really sensible approach.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford. Yeah, I am at Wherham next Tuesday, in fact, 27th. Any members of the Cabinet disagree with the recommendations? In which case, we'll take the recommendations as read. Thank you very much. The next agenda item is item 8, which is the procurement of the Highways Term Service Contract, brackets HTSC. Councillor Andrews is going to introduce this again and seek a seconder.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor John Andrews from Sherborne and Cabinet Member for Place Services. This paper looks at how we will be delivering our highway services in 2027. Dorset Council delivers its highway network through a mixed economy model, with just over half the work being carried out by the private sector. The largest private sector highway contract we have is a term service contract, which is awarded to a single private sector contractor working in partnership with Dorset Council. The current term service contract expires in 2 years' time, and this paper seeks Cabinet support to procure a partner to work with us for up to a decade, beginning in April 2027. My Highways corporate director has got a few slides, if you'd like to go through them.
I think we should.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, looks like it's all popped up on the screen there. So I've got 5 slides, including the title slide, on the Highways Term Service contract.
Introduce yourself, Jim.
I was given such a good introduction, but I will repeat my name. My name is Jack Wiltshire. I'm the Corporate Director for Highways and Engineering for Dorset Council. So this is predominantly, it's a highways contract for carrying out road works, as I think most people would probably see it. We've got particular things which are proposed to be within the scope of the contract and things which are not to be within the scope of the contract. The things not in scope are things which are currently delivered in-house by Dorset Council, and we can demonstrate are delivered very effectively at a very good price. So we don't intend to include that in the contract, but certainly things going into the contract, looking at having a single private sector partner assisting us in delivering our highways works are things like, well, structural maintenance, but most people would see that as road surfacing, bridge and structure construction and maintenance, highways improvements, so things like traffic signal replacements, roundabouts, all those sorts of things, new cycleways, so any sort of heavy civil engineering infrastructure. But then this isn't purely looking at highways. There's other things which are sensible to include within the contract, because it's likely that a tier one of the highest providers of civil engineering works in the country is going to be the likely partner. So we can be a little bit more, we can take the scope a bit further. So we want to see whether things like harbour walls should be within scope of a contract and things like waste management centres. So in the current version of the contract, the household waste management centre at Blandford is being constructed under this contract. In the future, we could indeed do things like harbour wall and coastal erosion protection works, if it does indeed look like the external providers are people that could provide best value for those sorts of activities. Funding for the works, some of the funding is from Dorset Council, but the vast majority of highways funding is from the Department for Transport. And just to set a scale level, this year's single year settlement from the DFT is £27 million for highways works within Dorset. And some of the key statistics for the contract, none of these are set in stone, but the starting point for discussions is that we're looking at a possible length of 10 years. So we would look to say that there'll be 5 core years and then extensions to that based on key performance indicators and the contractor demonstrating they've hit those KPIs suitably. So 5 years core, then plus 3 years and plus 2 years to bring us up to a maximum of 10 years. And the anticipated contract value, it is a significant contract for Dorset Council. It is a top-up resource contract, so in theory, you could not spend any money with it, but it is likely that we'll be spending certainly into the millions, and a high-end figure is probably getting close to £250 million, but more likely to be probably just under 200 million if it goes over that full 10-year cycle. And the form of contract proposed is the NEC 4 contract, and that's seen as the industry standard currently. And my last slide is just looking at an indicative timetable. So we're currently getting ready for preliminary market engagement, so talking with potential suppliers. And during those conversations, we want to make sure that we are talking to the right people, making sure that we're as attractive as possible, but also making sure that we're getting the right contractor to be wanting to be interested in Dorset. And already through that preliminary engagement, we're finding there's very good interest from contractors wanting to work in Dorset. We're a very attractive offer. In terms of then preparing the next stages, so we need to prepare the contract documentation, which will happen over the next year or so. Then the actual tender process will go out to tender between March and September 2026, with the award in October 2026. We then have a standstill period, and the new contract would begin on the 1st of April 2027. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wiltshire. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Andrews? Councillor Clifford, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I think this is a very big contract. It's one of the bigger contracts that the council has. It's imperative we get it right. I think it's within the documentation and within the tender process. I think we need to stress creativity and flexibility. If you think back 10 years ago, it was the Apple iPhone 6, which had a front-facing camera, and it was all very exciting. Nowadays, of course, we poo-poo that and laugh at it. So in 10 years' time, we need the contractor who comes in to have that creativity and flexibility to adapt to. AI will appear old hat, I suspect, by then, and it'll be whatever the next generation is. So perhaps instead of a statement, I could just reinforce that the contract needs to reflect moving times, technology, and opportunities.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford. I do have one question myself. Councillor Hobbs-Chell, do you have a question? No? Yes? Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Hobbs-Chell, Fernand South. I think ultimately it's a good thing to have that competition and to take it in-house and to be able to do the external work. I suppose the concern is always, is there a minimum level of contract that we would have to deliver? Because that would be a worry in terms of the competitiveness, I suppose, because if we can deliver it more competitively, we don't want to stop ourselves from being able to do it in-house if we have to deliver a minimum amount out to that under that contract. And I suppose the other question I have is, are we looking at being able to assess each scheme against our ability to do it in-house more competitively? Or I would just urge a little bit of caution on that and just make sure we've got that wrapped up, because we could risk, I wouldn't want to risk us kind of not being lazy. Sounds really harsh. I don't mean being lazy, but it could be an auto that we go to it, and I would be hesitant about that if we could deliver it better in-house.
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to pick up both of those. So the first question about the level of, I'll call it top-up resource. So the way we're effectively set up with Endorset is to have an in-house resource which can provide our winter maintenance function, and that requires, as an absolute minimum, 75 people, but you want to have a few more people just to make sure you've got some spare capacity there. What we then can't do is flex up if we have significant investment for particular schemes. So we're thinking about recent history, the Transforming Cities Fund, South East Dorset, Gillingham Principal Street, that's a £7 million scheme. We don't have the in-house resources to be able to gear up to deliver those projects. So while we deliver what we can do very effectively, we do need to have some form of a top-up provider to be able to flex up. In terms of flexing down, it's very unlikely we'd be in a situation where we would flex down. There is far more work for us to be able to do than we have for our current resources. But that's effectively how we pitched ourselves. And then the second question about determining which or who is best to do which particular schemes, that's covered in two different directions. The first one is that through the governance, through the Office of Governance of a project, there's an operations board and a strategic partnership board, and those boards would discuss upcoming projects and look to see the merits of which provider would be the best person to do it, whether it be internal or external. But also in the Cabinet paper, we're talking about the delegated decisions on spend thresholds as to how we would decide to use the contract. So there's a delegation to Councillor Andrews for particularly large schemes.
Councillor Hope.
Thank you very much, Leader. Councillor Ryan Hope, Portfolio for Customer Culture, Community Engagement. And I'm just wondering, as part of this tendering exercise when we go out, is there any weighting to the contractor having certain policies in place. So I'm thinking, recently we've discussed around some of our policies and charters that we signed up to. I'm thinking the Armed Forces Covenant, for an example. Is that influenced in this tender process that we would go to a provider that has same values as an employer as we have? I'm thinking also apprenticeships, upskilling workforce. Does that come into this effect, or are we purely looking from a financial best value as well as a really good employer for Dorset people and aligned to our values and our vision and our strategies?
Thank you. Yes, very good question. At the moment, obviously, we haven't written the policy, so those exact weightings haven't been determined. We will determine those once we've spoken to the private sector and got a feel for the market. But to directly address things like the Armed Forces Covenants, it's within it's within our gift to say if there's particular pass-fail questions. So if we want to think, if there's a particular aspect we want to include, we can certainly state that. Most authorities pick up things like Armed Forces Covenant within a social value element. So under the Procurement Act, there is an element which is necessary to demonstrate social value within the contract. So ultimately, all those would go into a scoring, which would be a balance of cost versus quality. That particular balance has not yet been agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Wiltshire. I do have one question. It's about recommendation 4, about the value items of the contract worth more than 500,000. The recommendation is to delegate it to Councillor Andrews and the Highways Director. That would obviously our normal method is that goes to Cabinet if it's 500,000. So I guess my question is this the current situation with highways at the moment? And if so, maybe looking to Jonathan, is he happy for that to continue?
Chairman, yes, I am.
Councillor Biggs?
Yeah, 2 questions. Firstly, using NEC 4, which has numerous ways of pricing in risk, whether the risk is fully with the contractor or partially with us, etc. What form would that take within this contract that you're envisaging, please? That's the first question. And the second point is around vehicle maintenance. You said that that's been excluded from being seen as right for tendering. I'm slightly surprised at that, because I would have thought, normally there's potentially an 8% saving if for going out to the private sector potentially. I know it's always a bit specialist, but local government is an expensive way of employing people, etc., as we know. I wonder if you could explain that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so all details which are being considered at the moment. The risk balance probably depends on the particular type of project which is being delivered. So there'll be different contract types within the NEC 4 that we would utilise. Your bread and butter stuff, your day-to-day road surfacing work is likely to be bill of quantities, schedule of rates. So in that element, all the risk is on the contractor, because they are saying they will provide for that particular rate. Where we look to have a partnership and share risk is on the higher value contracts, and it is likely that we'd be looking at target cost forms of contracts for significant projects such as waste management centres, because instead of sitting at a fixed price, you've then got the opportunity with a target cost to have a gain share, where the contractor is actively looking to reduce the costs to have an element of that gain share. It sounds like you're probably familiar with those, but yes, in answer to your question, it will depend on the value of the works and the type of works, but for the higher works, we'd be looking to have a more reasonable share of a risk if it reduces costs. And on the vehicle maintenance, to make it clear, the reason we've said that vehicle maintenance isn't included in the contract is because we would be expecting the private sector provider to provide their own vehicles for their specific projects, or their activities. So we would expect them to maintain their own vehicles in that respect. However, we wouldn't expect the provider to maintain Dorset Council's vehicles because Dorset Council has its own in-house fleet team.
Yes, so sorry, I should have meant, that's what I meant actually, our own in-house element. You say that's been discounted from outsourcing, but I mean, you said you got the data for that. I wonder where, be interesting to dive into that at some time as to why you think that. Okay.
Actually, vehicle maintenance doesn't come under Jack. It comes under waste. It's Gemma Clinton runs all the vehicle maintenance. So it might be a question to ask.
Councillor Clem.
Yeah, just a quick question. So just following on, I understand the difficulties of discussing procurement regulations, but would you anticipate some of the tenders coming back with economic benefit for Dorset? Would you, for instance, look to see local supply chains enacted and used?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is what we'd expect to be scored under the quality part of the submissions. Again, we haven't detailed what the quality criteria would be for those, but I would certainly expect to see, as I mentioned, it would be a Tier 1 contractor, but I would expect that Tier 1 contractor supply chain to certainly be using businesses within Dorset to supply them.
Okay, I think that's the end of questions. Any Cabinet member disagree with the 4 recommendations? No, in which case, thank you very much. That's passed. So next agenda item is item 12, which is urgent items. There aren't any. And item 13, exempt business. There is no exempt business. So we can close the meeting at 18:52. Thank you for your attendance.